This is HBR News number 517. Boys object to girl in boys' locker room, women most affected. Where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio, because I hope you guys are doing well this week and that you're laughing at all of this absurdity so that you are not consumed by it. I'm your host, Brian. I'm joined by, as always, my lovely co-hosts, Hannah Wallen and Dr. Randercam. On this week's HBR News show, we got kind of a packed show, and I had to leave some things out. I'm sorry, we're not going to be doing Highlander Girl today, although I have a feeling that Allison and I might be ranting about that a lot tomorrow. So, maybe subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss it, because I swear we're going to have a take that no one else seems to have on that particular situation, particularly the reaction to it. But this week, or on this show, we're going to be talking about this interesting story that involved a girl in a boys' locker room in a school and how that was handled. Disney now showing a shocked Pikachu face at the fact that they are losing the young male audience and they can't seem to figure out why. Cracker Barrel just broke the internet with by ditching its cracker and more, so stick around, it's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So you guys know that, we've been talking about the loneliness epidemic and the male crisis with young men for a long, long time, but the normies are catching up, and the feminists have to admit that we were not lying, and so now they're forced to address it. And of course, we're going to be looking at this article from The Guardian by Van Bedham, I guess, who wrote this provocative thought piece entitled, "Middle-aged men are among society's loneliest people. What does that say about the patriarchy?" How is the patriarchy to blame for this? So, I only assume that that's where this is going. The subheading is, "The internet, toxic male influencers, and ruthless marketeers, not biology, have helped create a cohort of men with few friends." So, yeah, we'll look at that in the patron show. And if you want to join us for this little, bit of online AIDS opinions, then you have to become a Badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com /subscribe and joining our community. That will allow you to watch all the additional content, and you'll be able to get into the Discord server where you'll be able to hang out with the lovely, lovely members of our community, which includes men and women. So you won't be lonely there. You won't have to worry about whether or not patriarchy is responsible for you having a bad day, or if it rains outside, or if you happen to step in gum, any of these little inconveniences that we may have. Maybe patriarchy didn't do it. I don't know, but maybe it does. It's hard to say. So, and if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that our content has been erased from the face of the internet, then please go to badgerfeed.com or honeybadgerradio.com to find where all of our content lives. If you want to send us a message at any point during the show, also, this is something I don't do enough, go to feedthebadger.com /justthetip to send us a tip and a message. This is better than a super chat because, first of all, Google doesn't get half the money if you send it that way. Also, you'll be able to say whatever you want without censorship, and you can also give us longer messages. So there's nothing but advantages to doing that. Okay, so with all of that out of the way, let us get into today's stories. So first, we have this. In May of 2025, at Stonebridge High School in Loudoun County, Virginia, 2 boys were suspended for 10 days after they expressed discomfort about a biologically female student who apparently identified as male using the boys' locker room and recording them with her phone or other device. So this is Loudoun County. If you guys don't know, it's been the center of attention for some sort of I guess you could say issues of the wrong sex people being in other people's spaces. Although in the past it was boys in girls' bathrooms. I think there was a particular incident where something happened with a boy in a girl's bathroom. Now we're seeing the inverse of that. And now the first time around, it created a tremendous amount of outrage. There was, parents were ranting at the students, at the teachers rather, and the staff, and they needed something to be done. You probably remember that. because I know we covered it here
Oh yeah,
on this
yeah.
show. So this incident though is the inverse. This is a girl in the boys' locker room, a girl who identifies as a boy, okay, and recording them. So this is like another layer on top of that. This incident led to a Title IX investigation by Loudoun County Public Schools, resulting in the boys who expressed discomfort, being found guilty of sexual harassment and sex based discrimination. The controversy has ignited significant parental backlash and prompted investigations by Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares and the U.S. Department of Education, which subsequently labeled the district as high risk for its transgender policies. This classification threatens the district's future federal funding and has intensified debates over student privacy and gender identity in schools. The broader context of this incident is rooted in Loudoun County's ongoing struggles with transgender policies, which have previously drawn national attention, which I already set up in the beginning. If you guys remember, in 2021, the district faced a $30 million lawsuit following a sexual assault by a male student in a woman's restroom, highlighting issues with the district's handling of gender-related policies. The current case has further polarized opinions, with Virginia Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears advocating for the boys and criticizing what she calls insanity in gender ideology policies. By the way, Governor Winsome Sears is up for re-election this year, and I'm going to vote for her if I can, because she did stand up for the boys in this case, which seems like common sense to me. The U.S. Department of Education's intervention underscores the national significance of these local disputes as it pressures the district to reassess its approach amidst a backdrop of legal and social contention. So,
I did,
go
yeah,
ahead, Mike.
I did wonder if this was ever going to crop up as a story. For all the huffing and puffing we hear about men invading women's toilets, no one seems to give a shit about women invading men's toilets, or indeed men's spaces in general. And the reasoning with which we're often handed is it's because women don't rape men. Well, yes, they do. Very much so. It's just that we don't call it rape in a lot of regions. Uh, when it does happen, uh, female on male rape, it usually happens in private with weapons or coercion or whatnot. It's unlikely to happen in a public toilet. But on the other hand, false accusations of rape can happen anywhere, especially anywhere that doesn't have CCTV, which toilets generally don't. So men should be concerned about women using their toilets and whatever separate spaces they even have left, because there are women who lie. There are women who lie just for the sake of fucking up a man's life. It's rare, yes, but is it any more rare than men raping women? No, I think it's probably more common. I think it's probably considerably more common because women can get away with lying almost as much as they get away with raping men or boys. But that's not the issue in this circumstance, because we're talking about school children. School children aren't generally all that worried about rape because they're children. They generally don't do much raping, but they do lie. As soon as they learn to speak, they learn how to lie. So, if anything, boys have more to fear from girls than girls have to fear from boys. Not least because schools tend to believe girls no matter what, and they don't believe boys no matter what. But it's even more fundamental than that. Children generally aren't worried about getting raped by other children or about getting falsely accused of rape by other children. It's not the first thing on their minds. But they still want their toilets to themselves. They want to have something to themselves, especially boys. They have to spend 7 hours a day in this cramped prison where boys and girls are just thrown together with each other as strangers. And the only time they get to segregate as they see fit is when they go to the toilet. It's the only space boys have left where they can have a couple of minutes of respite from the weird shit that girls do. They can't even go to Boy Scouts anymore because girls fucking killed it. While Girl Scouts is still going strong because boys did not kill it. It's the small boy equivalent of going for a smoke, like the Ben Affleck meme, where he's just standing in the doorway with his cigarette, facing the sky with his eyes closed, with this palpable expression of holy fucking crap, this is bullshit. This thing I have to do is bullshit. Thank God I can have 5 minutes to myself to get away from this ridiculous bullshit. Little boys don't smoke much. I mean, they're certainly not allowed to smoke in school. The only thing they're allowed to do to get away from girls and the feminist lesbian teachers who treat the girls better in every conceivable dimension. All they have is being able to stand in the little boys' room, maybe leaning against the wall with their head buried in their elbow as they piss into the urinal and spend a few precious moments without that infernal shit in their lives. So why the fuck should they have to put up with a girl entering their space and doing the child equivalent of falsely accusing them of rape? You just hate trans kids. I'm a boy just like you. I should get to use the same facilities as you and not be judged for the crime of being a girl who is actually a boy. It's like, the boys are just, for fuck's sake, this was all we had. This was the only space anywhere in society where we could get away from this shit for like 5 minutes. Please, please, for the love of God, can we have this to ourselves? No, absolutely not. You cannot have anything to yourselves. What's mine is mine. What's yours is ours, darling. But I'm just a child. I'm just a little boy. No, you're not. You are the patriarchy. Just like your father's father and your father's father's father. You will never know peace. We will never allow you to know peace because we have decreed that you do not deserve it, even in the fucking womb. We'll get to that later. All right, good. Well, thank you. I, as a boy, have about 7 years left of this shit before I'm statistically likely to kill myself. But so do you, you stupid fucking tranny. How is this working out? We're both going to live lives that are nasty, brutish, and short, and we will both shuffle off this mortal coil long before our time. Is this what you wanted? Yes. Fair enough. Mission accomplished. I hope the history books are kind to you. I hope they're at least lenient with me. I will see you in hell. Let's hope hell is segregated. Though I imagine it isn't, given how much of it that we've already seen on Earth. Ugh.
So there's a few things that I can point out here that are not echoes, at least. First of all, historically, and I know that women have been complaining a lot in the last few years about boys and girls locker rooms and boys and girls sports, pretending to be trans in order to get in, and that is a thing. There are cisgendered boys and men who have, some degree of predation. They're in that less than 1% of the population that is actually criminally violent, that are pretending to be trans and that are using that to get into spaces where women think they're safe and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And one of the things that women have complained about is recording. Right? So this isn't something that hasn't been discussed, and the behavior hasn't been condemned. It's something that's been discussed extensively, and the behavior has been extensively condemned. And all of a sudden, now that it's happening to boys, it's not that big of a deal. I don't think so. And I know that historically, this one school system, this one community, has had a struggle to get their officials to recognize that the majority are what the trans community calls cisgender, that's their word for normal, to avoid using the word normal, and that it is a tiny minority that they are catering to, and they're not even catering to real transgender people. They're catering to people with issues that are using the situation, using the concept of transphobia and the concept of I consider it to be pathological politeness, where there are circumstances in the face of which you have every reason to not be polite. If somebody punches you in the face, you do not politely ask them to stop. There is a point at which you have to defend yourself. Have to, right? And objecting to their presence is one of the ways to do that. Objecting to authorities. Another way, and if this had been an actual boy in the locker room filming other boys, would be to beat the ever-loving fuck out of him. And that's what would have happened. The boys being filmed would have hit the boy that was filming them. But they can't, because the minute they hit this person, she's a girl again. And they're hitting girls. And I know that because I've seen that discussion online too. Even though she's trans, she's smaller and weaker because she has a female biological body. Right? So we can quit with the bullshit of you're just transphobic if you object to this. Right? We can quit with the bullshit of you are a monster of isms and phobias if you don't let people who claim to be part of a protected group abuse you with impunity. Being part of a protected group doesn't override the fact that abuse is abuse. And when I say abuse, I'm not using that word lightly. Early on in our, I guess, career as journalists and commentators, we covered a story that happened here in Ohio, in Steubenville, where a girl got drunk out of her mind, and so did a bunch of boys at a party with her, and they all engaged in a bunch of sexual activity, and there were pictures and there was video, and a bunch of the kids passed the pictures and video around, and because of that, they all got caught. And the attorney general of the state in Ohio used threats of prosecuting those kids for creation and possession of child porn, for having those pictures and passing them around, to coerce them into testifying against two of the boys and treating them as having orchestrated the whole thing and committed rape. And we'll never know what actually happened because the coerced testimony was used to write the public narrative. And the fact of the coercion was based on the undeniable fact that creating images and video of underage kids is the creation of child porn. So in this story, what is being reported here is that a high school student was filming other high school students in the locker room where they shower and change clothes. So no matter what gender questions, no matter what discussion there is of cis or trans or normal or abnormal or phobic or not, there is. The very bottom line of this story is an individual went into a locker room where there were underage kids and filmed them. Thereby creating child porn. And that's the real story here. And that's the story that would be getting told if this was a girl's locker room. And if this was a girl's locker room, nobody would feel comfortable defending the act of filming. telling the boys that their discomfort with this, their objection is somehow an ism or a phobia. Nobody would be suggesting the individual did nothing wrong, belonged in there, should be treated with any form of special lenience or impunity, or that the boys should in any way be punished for objecting. But here we are. This is being debated, discussed, and debated. And it's not even rare, right? It's not like this is the only incident we could get our hands on of women going into men's spaces, invading men's spaces or boys' spaces against the will of the people whose space it is. This goes clear back into women and girls suing to get into men's and boys' organizations, professional organizations, recreational organizations, clubs, and so on. Women and girls suing to join men's and boys' athletic teams during the latter half of the 20th century. Women suing to work as journalists in men's locker rooms, the locker rooms of male sports teams, and then later suing for sexual harassment because they were using their own locker rooms for their intended function. It's sexual harassment, guys, if a woman invades your naked space and you happen to be naked in there. Right? And women have, for so long, made out like it was an act of courage to invade men's and boys' restrooms, that it's normal. There is an article, Ipsos.com has nearly half of women use the men's room, not because it's an emergency, not because they're desperate to go and they've confirmed that there's nobody in there standing at a urinal exposed who doesn't want them in there or anything like that, just to avoid long lines in the women's bathroom. Because it's inconvenient for them to wait. They feel annoyed. And so they invade a men's nude space, where, by the way, they might impose their presence on underage boys who are using the urinal exposed and don't expect a grown woman to walk in on them. So I don't feel sorry for anybody who's upset that people are objecting to this girl being in the boys' locker room. And I have no sympathy for people that are going, see, we told you so about men and boys invading girls' sports, because actually this is a see, I told you so from boys and men. Women did the invading first, and they've continually invaded, and they've continually used the argument, it's okay when we do it. Well, here's one that used the moment to create child porn. And there's actually an argument about whether or not that was bad. Folks, that is, in a nutshell, male disposability.
Yeah. Well, you guys basically said it. I mean, I'm at the point now where I don't really have anything to add. I mean, I think it speaks for itself. It's not, it should be surprising, but it isn't. And it's just kind of where we're at. So, trans men exist until they feel hard done by, then they become women. And that's just the way it is. Like, people want to pretend like they believe in these things, but they really don't. Like, they don't when it comes down to it. Think about it. Did Zelensky, when Ukraine was drafting, did they draft any trans men? No. They let them go. They basically became women. What about trans women? Well, they lost the right to be women. They became men again. So they were just drafting trans women and letting the trans men go. It was almost like the whole trans thing is bullshit. It's just bullshit, period. And it means nothing because no one actually believes it. They just like how it makes them feel to agree with something that is popular and it makes you look like a good person. But you're not a good person. You're not a good person. You're actually the opposite of that, because you're allowing people to live a delusion, and also you're still applying the rules differently anyway. So it doesn't really matter, like, at the end of the day. Anyway, I got a super chow right at the last minute. Thank you, Meredith. Before we move on to the next story, Meredith G gives us $5 and says, HBR News 517, it is hard enough being in a bathroom or a locker room when you are dealing with the same sex. There is a reason why these spaces should be close to the opposite sex, I guess is what you mean. Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school and we did swimming, I did not want to get, like, naked in front of men. I didn't want to get naked in front of anybody. So I
It's weird that was
100%
even
like,
an option. Like I
huh?
remember that. It's weird that that's even an option. I remember
Yeah.
that from high school. Like after we did PE or gym or
Yeah.
whatever you call it, and we went back to the gyms, and we had the option of showering off. And a couple of lads did it, and occasionally you'd go back and see them just fucking stark naked. Like, why do we even do this?
It was
Like,
weird, right? And the thing is,
why do we make minors fucking shower naked together? That's pretty
it's
fucking
weird. They know that, like, in my high school, which was a public
it
high
actually
school.
an option? It was optional at your high
No,
school?
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It wasn't considered optional. It was just like the bog standard, unless you did what I did, which was basically wait until everybody else was done and then, like, quickly change, or I'd, like, wear my swimming stuff underneath my clothes and then, like, go to a bathroom afterwards and change back out. And that's what I would do, because I didn't want to. I didn't do that. Like, no, like, that was just no. I was like 15, 14 years old. Why? I didn't know any of those people, So yeah, it's weird enough to do it around other dudes, but, like, to have girls around, that's insane.
When I was in
Like,
high school, my female gym teacher would literally stand in the locker room with us as we stripped and went into the shower and check off each of our names. And if she didn't think you washed well enough, she didn't check off your name and you got into trouble. It detracted from your grade. And if you didn't shower completely frequently enough, you actually got in like a detention. And I complained about that to my parents. I'm like, 'cause I'm gonna shower after gym class. I was that kid that, a lot of kids will stand around and do nothing in gym class because they don't want to get sweaty. I treated
Yeah.
gym class like recess. And, I played hard. I had to carry my inhaler for gym class just in case because I played hard. And so I showered just like, they said you should. And I remember after I complained to my mother about that, I'm like, it's kind of weird that she does that. It stopped. And then suddenly I became the focus of a lot of, like, I got sick one time. I was in the hospital for a week with pneumonia. And when I came out, the doctor said no gym class for 3 weeks, which to me felt like a punishment. And then she punished me for skipping class with a doctor's note for 3 weeks, even though I was there in the classroom. And did everything she could to make it difficult. I had to complain about that too. Like, and this woman was just an absolute bitch to me the entire time I was in gym class. We had the option of taking gym for 4 years, and I didn't because of her. I only took required gym class. And then, I was in sports, so I had it after school anyway. But I would say maybe 3 or 4 years after I graduated, because I was back home from college. She got busted for having a quote unquote sexual relationship with one of the boys in school. Now, she didn't teach the boys gym class. She was the volleyball coach. She was just the gym teacher and the volleyball coach. So she wasn't involved with any boys. I don't know how she got access to one of them, really. But yeah, she got busted for predatory sexual behavior, and I don't even know what all happened, other than the fact that, unlike the male teacher that I knew of that got busted for a similar activity with a female student, she did not go to jail. She didn't get arrested. She didn't get questioned by police. They just fired her, and she moved on to another school. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, not only was it not optional, like, and students that didn't want to sit next to you in class if you didn't shower would tell on you. This person didn't shower. But so even though none of the other gym teachers ever did that, like they didn't come into the locker room and check off names if you didn't shower. It was mandatory. But we had the because it was mandatory, because there was a written rule, and because there were penalties associated with breaking the written rule, a predator was able to exploit the situation when I was in school. I still remember that because that was just like, that was probably my first experience with a woman, an adult woman, just being creepy as fuck.
Yeah. Well, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We got to move on to the next story. Speaking of mental illness, um, so apparently there was a 2025 Quebec study published in the Journal of Psychiatric Research, which found that women who chose induced abortion were more than twice as likely to be hospitalized for mental health problems, such as psychiatric disorders, substance abuse, and suicidal attempts, or suicidal ideation at least, compared to women who carried their pregnancies to term. Specifically, the study reported that per 10,000 person years, 104 women, or 10,000 person years, 104 women who had an abortion were hospitalized for mental health issues versus 42 women who did not have abortions. The research followed over 1.2 million pregnancies for up to 17 years after either an abortion or birth, indicating that the risk of hospitalization was highest in the first 5 years post-abortion and was higher for women with pre-existing mental health problems. Additionally, women who chose repeat abortions were even more likely to encounter mental health problems requiring hospitalization than those who had their first abortion. And I want to say that I sent this link to Aiden Paladin, and I asked her if she could look into it more to just make sure there isn't a kind of like any bias, because the original article came out of, I think it was Breitbart or something. And of course, Breitbart, I think they were sort of like upholding it as like, oh, look, this is so obvious. But I did a little bit of digging, and there might be a little bit of contention, but all I'll say is it is likely true, but not to the same degree that the original source was sharing it. So I sent it to Aiden, and Aiden told me that she is very interested. She thinks that there's a lot of meat on that bone and that there's a lot of substance to it, and that she's going to read it and may make a video on it. So if you're not subscribed to Aiden Paladin, she's occasionally collaborates with us, and she's like a very spurgy researcher that does a lot of homework. So she's going to be following up on this. But like, if you take this and you couple it with the percentage of women that are on SSRIs, which is like 25% or something of women under 30 or under 35, something like that, it kind of tracks. So, but anyway, I wanted to put that one out there. I think, Hannah, you shared this one. So
Yeah.
I thought it was PJ Media. It wasn't Breitbart. It was PJ Media.
Right, PJ Media. So the reason I shared this is because of some history that I've experienced. I've been a pro-life activist for even longer than I've been a men's rights activist. And I've said this before, I learned about abortion before I was old enough to have the flawed thinking that adults use to make up excuses, adult women use to make up excuses for terrible behavior. So, and I learned about it from a nurse. My grandmother was actually an obstetrics nurse before she went on to actually be very instrumental in the creation and definition of a whole field of medicine. But her specialty was babies and childbirth, and pregnancy, and so when she explained abortion to me, she explained it in very clinical terms, not pulling any punches on what was happening. And we had just, finished the part of sex ed where they go through the stages of gestation and what is happening. And it's very clear in that discussion that the discussion is about a living human organism at its earliest stage of life that is essentially the youngest child can be. And that at some point it develops feeling, and at some point it develops sapience, and then sentience, and and so on. And that there are methods of abortion that take place during all those stages. So of course I was horrified, absolutely horrified that anybody would voluntarily do this when there wasn't some medical emergency that forced their hand. And so from the age of 14, I was an activist. And I studied this. I learned about this. I learned about the processes of thought involved in it, the arguments for and against, like everything that I could. I was obsessed with the subject for years because it was such a horrific thing that I think women should know better than to do. And one of the things that I ran up against over and over again is feminists treating it like it's a consequence-free means of making sex consequence-free. And everything I found in studying the subject, learning about pregnancy and abortion and sexual contact, even just plain sexual contact, they're wrong. They're 100% wrong about every aspect of that. There are consequences to frivolous sexual contact. Even if you don't get pregnant, even if you don't get an STI, there are psychological consequences to that. There are psychological changes that take place because of chemical changes in your body when you get pregnant. There are psychological consequences to cutting that off. Women go through grief after a miscarriage. And it's not just because they wanted the baby. It's because your body is biologically programmed to put you through grief. And it really feels like something is wrong that you can't explain to other people after you've had a miscarriage. I don't know if I can even put this into words, but there is a hole that develops in your psyche where there was a developing baby and now there's not, even if you didn't know you were pregnant before you had the miscarriage. And I know that because that happened to me. And I went through depression and grief and pain and suffering because of that. And it was a situation where even if I had known, there was nothing I could have done. It was not a pregnancy that would ever have been viable. And there was never a chance that there was going to be a baby in that situation. But it doesn't change what it does to a woman's psyche when she experiences that. So to go in and have a physician use instruments to do that to you, it's going to create the same chemical changes, the same biological changes. And even if you were upset about the pregnancy and you didn't want it, you can't prevent that from happening. That still happens. Your brain chemistry still changes. Your hormone levels still change. You do still go through an emotional response. And it's associated with the experience. So one of the things I learned about during my years as a pro-life protester and debater was something that pro-lifers refer to as post-abortion syndrome. Surgery is traumatic, and abortion is an invasive surgery when it's done like the D&C or the D&E abortions. And there's no getting around that. Having something inserted into an orifice is invasive, no matter what feminists tell you. It's not like getting your fingernails clipped. And every woman that I know that has been through the experience of having an abortion and been willing to describe it to me has had trauma associated with that experience that's commensurate with trauma that you would have from any other invasive procedure that is done while you are fully conscious. And on top of that, then, immediately following that, they have the hormonal changes and the brain chemistry changes that take place after a miscarriage. And yet, abortion advocates consistently, even though what I'm describing is similar to, like, yeah, Jen Bottle has mentioned postpartum depression. It's very similar to the way postpartum depression is described. I was lucky; I didn't really have severe PPD after giving birth, but I absolutely did after having a miscarriage. It was just unbelievable. I cannot begin to tell you how bad that was. It was almost as bad as the short period in my life when I was suicidal. And that it's very, very close. And in any case, by denying the existence of post-abortion syndrome, instead of looking into it as something that might need to be taken into consideration by the industry, that women who experience this after an abortion shouldn't turn around and just, ignore it and assume that they are the problem because they are listening to the wrong people, but instead seek some psychological treatment. Then they might have had a chance to prevent some women from ending up in this research. They might have had a chance to prevent some women from having breakdowns or trying to commit suicide or otherwise experiencing mental health emergencies. But instead, I know women who have tried to commit suicide after an abortion because they had symptoms that are very similar to a cross between postpartum depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that, even if you're pro-choice, right? Because it is an invasive medical procedure, and it is something that changes your body chemistry, and it is something that changes for at least a period of time. It changes the way that you think and the way that you're able to control and respond to your feelings. And the only reason that exists for denying that instead of addressing it is because they know that abortion is an ill-advised choice overwhelmingly most of the time. And they don't want to talk about that. So they can't talk about it having any consequences for the woman. Right?
Yeah.
And that's the situation. Now, the other thing that I've observed in terms of like it, and this is a small group, but the women that I know that have had abortions are women with a history of making ill-advised choices, where at the very least, their speed of maturing into the adult behavior of thinking what will happen if I do this or can happen if I do this before they do it has been slower than that of the women around them, but a lot of them have had some sort of personality disorder or behavioral disorder where they're more inclined to make stupid choices even if they consider the possible consequences. And they might be more selfish about who those consequences should fall on even than the average woman. It's hard to extrapolate that to the general female population, but this research kind of clicks with my experience with women who have said, well, I had an abortion and I'm fine. And then in the course of conversation, they sort of reveal to you all of the ways in which actually they're not fine. So this issue, I talk a lot about the ethical end of it, that you are terminating the life of a living human organism, and the conditions under which that is being done are not conditions that make it acceptable to terminate human life under any other rubric. Like, here you are, saying, well, it's because it's unborn, it's because it's not a human yet. Well, it is, it's still human, and it is alive, so you can't say it's not alive yet. You can only argue things like sentience and sapience and personhood, which get into weeds that affect born people with disabilities, right? I've talked about that a lot. But the other end of it is there is damage to the woman when she does this. And a lot of the women that are doing it start out already damaged. And that makes the damage they experience afterward even worse. And, I understand a lot of people recognizing the moral aspect of this are like, well, I don't feel sorry for those women. They made their choices. And I can understand that. The problem comes in when the consequences that these women are visiting upon themselves alter their behavior in ways that end up visited upon the whole rest of the community. It affects their relationships with other people. It affects those people's lives, and it affects their relationships with their future children, and it affects those children's lives, like in particular, over all of the other people that they have relationships with. So then of course you also have to deal with them at work if they work in a position where they're dealing with other people. You have to deal with the way that they vote. You have to deal with the way that they deal with debt, spend money, and so on. And if they are bad decision makers, and this makes it worse, every issue that is caused in society by people who are irresponsible with money, irresponsible with their relationships, irresponsible with the way that they treat other people, gets exacerbated by the issue of consequences women face from having abortion being ignored. They become a problem in society. So that's why I put this in the chat. It does look like I've been right about this all along, that women are more likely to have an abortion if they already have some issues, and after they've had the abortion, their issues are worse most of the time.
Yeah. Mike, did you want to say anything?
Yeah. Everyone knows the meme from before memes were a thing, that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So we have to ask, what power has been given to women? Well, a hell of a lot of powers, as it happens. And it's up to and including the power over life and death. Literally, they've been given a license to kill. But they're not highly trained intelligence agents, especially not fictional ones, dealing with international criminals. They are ordinary women dealing with defenseless children, their own defenseless children. Of course, that's going to result in corruption of the mind and of the moral conscience. That's why they have to linguistically redefine everything. It's not killing, and that's not a child. We call it something else, therefore it is something else. That's the kind of mental pole vaulting you have to do to justify having the power to kill children. Now we're at the point where that's not a man and that's not a woman. We call it something else, therefore it is something else. They do it with everything now. They'll do it with apples and oranges at some point. You'll see. They'll look at an apple and see what it is because of the obvious apple-like properties, and then they'll just discard that sensory information and go, but if I identify it as an orange, then it is an orange, even though I instinctively and intellectually know the difference between the observable properties of an apple and the observable properties of an orange. None of that none of that information is as important as the squirrely bullshit that happens between my mouth and my brain. I mean, from my brain to my mouth when it comes to explaining these things, because that's how I make it work. That's the only way I can make it work to justify the literal killing of literal children. And it's not just women, by the way, it's doctors, it's what we call scientists, it's what we call medical experts. They too have been given the power, carte blanche, to kill children, albeit at the behest of women. Maybe doctors shouldn't be given that power either. Maybe they too are corrupted by this power to the point that they too have decided that they can butterfly someone's genitals and claim they have changed what they know is XY to what they know is XX, or vice versa, even though they know they haven't changed it. They've just cosmetically professed to have changed it. But I'm pretty sure it was women who came first. Women wanted the power to justify any surgical procedure, and the doctors went along with it because the government told them to, or the pursuit of profit told them to. Well, both, I guess, the government and the pursuit of profit, subsidized by each other. And now we've reached the point where doctors are at the point where they can order you to undergo any procedure that the government has ordered them to perform. And just like that, like 70% of the population has had a corporate product stamped on their genes. Literally. I suppose the moral of the story is, well, something I already outlined. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And surely you cannot get more absolute than the power over life and death. The real problem is how on earth we're supposed to define what life is. Does it begin at conception? Does it begin at birth? Or is it somewhere in the 9-month process that is the creation of life? It's a hell of a question, the one that we might spend eternity trying to answer. But in the meantime, we can trim the logical fat. If anyone, perhaps even a Supreme Court justice, can tell you, I don't know what a woman is, I'm not a biologist, but at the same time, they will have a very staunch opinion on exactly when a non-human embryo becomes a human child. The kind of thing on which you would expect to have to consult a biologist of some sort. That's when you've got some shit. That's when you've got some shit going on. They will express total ignorance and total revealed wisdom on exactly the same subject at exactly the same time. This is a symptom of having been given a literal license to kill just because you're an ordinary woman. Why wouldn't that corrupt your mental health? So, yeah, none of this is particularly surprising when you break it down. Women have been given the power to arbitrate over life and death, and it's driving them insane. But there's an easy fix. I wonder if anyone can tell me what that easy fix is. It's maybe don't give women the power to arbitrate over life and death just because they're women. All these stories we have about human hubris and men trying to play God, and how it always goes wrong when men try to play God. Well, guess what? Women can't be trusted with that power either. Nor doctors, neither, even though they are doctors. So definitely not women just because they're women. But hey, I'm not a biologist. I'm not even a real doctor. None of this is medical advice. Ignore me!
Thanks, Mike. Yeah. I think you guys basically, covered it. And
Well,
I'm
there's
not
one thing that needs to be rebutted, and that
okay.
is that we don't know when life starts, right? There is a scientific consensus on the characteristics that determine whether something is a living organism
Organism.
versus or that it's made up of living tissue. Even single-celled organisms are considered living organisms, right? So there's a consensus determining what constitutes living organisms versus inanimate objects, or organisms that were alive once but now they're dead. Right?
Yeah.
And that those are the only three possibilities. There's no pre-living organism. There's tissue that can create a living organism if it's combined, and there's tissue that can support a living organism after it's been created. But none of that is really relevant. The thing that's relevant is the only time in discussion of any aspect of medicine or science or law when anyone deviates from that consensus is when they're talking about abortion.
Yeah.
That should tell you something
More than that,
about when life begins.
It's more than that though. It's women's comfort, because the conversation has moved away from life and has now become about consciousness. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's not like people will say, no, we're not talking about when it's alive. We're talking about when it's conscious. So consciousness becomes the new goalpost, because that's fuzzier. But I agree. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, because all we're talking about is, like, you can look at the abortion issue in a way as a very like hard example of gynocentrism in action, because it has nothing to do with the baby. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the comfort of the woman carrying the unborn child. That's the whole conversation around abortion. Everything about it, every landmine that people dance around, every time people change their vocabulary or the language around it because they're trying not to offend the mother or even like the people on the other side of the discussion, all of it is centered around the comfort of women, especially the pregnant woman in question. And like, it's all wrapped in that, which is why if a pregnant woman is murdered, it's considered a double homicide. And that's when it matters, because now the woman is dead. So now her victimhood has been elevated to the highest possible standard, which is murder victim. So now we can like use the baby to double victimize the woman and say, oh no, she wasn't just killed. She was killed with child, which means she was extra killed and it's extra bad. So if people are telling you gynocentrism doesn't exist, you can use the abortion argument and the way that it's framed, just the framing of it. The whole thing is framed around women's comfort and women's perspective and women's idea of what a life is. And it literally has nothing to do with the baby, it has nothing to do with it. That's just the tool in play. And when you put the most vulnerable human, which is an unborn child, and they become a tool for the woman that is carrying the child, that's when you know you have maximized on abortion, on gynocentrism rather. That is, to me, like that's it. That's the highest form. And so it becomes whatever it needs to be that keeps the woman comfortable, whether it's a clump of cells or a life. So
there's solid evidence for what Brian has said there. And some of the best evidence you can get for it is if you talk about abortion from the perspective of there's also a legal and social consensus on the circumstances under which it is regrettable but acceptable for one human being to take action to terminate the life of another human being on purpose, right? Not just to stop preserving a human life, but to actively do something to stop the progress of a human life. There's consensus on when that's acceptable, and consensus on when it's a crime or when it's a sin, right? When it's an evil act, and that gets abandoned in the discussion on abortion as well. And abortion advocates come up with all kinds of convoluted scenarios to discuss that reverse cause and effect and reverse agency between the mother and the baby in pregnancy scenarios in order to get around that when discussing this subject. And the fact that people tolerate that, the fact that people go along with those discussions and debate those questions as if they are legitimate questions just because we're discussing abortion, tells you everything you need to know. Gynocentrism exists, and it is a threat to the entire area of human ethics.
All right. Well, anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We got to move on to the next story. I got a super chat from Richard Bier. Thank you, Richard, for $5. And he says what Hannah just said. Thank you. All right. So let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments, and we'll move on. So these last two stories a little bit more like chill. So Disney is grappling with a significant dilemma as its marquee franchises, the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Star Wars, have all lost appeal among young Gen Z men for some reason, which I can't possibly fathom, a demographic that once formed a core part of their audience. According to a Variety report, and several others at this point, there have been more since, Disney executives are now pressuring creatives to develop new content specifically targeting boys and young men aged 13 to 28, acknowledging that the current strategy of endless sequels and reboots has alienated this group. Yeah, not the stuff that's all girl boss stuff and like shitting on men, but okay. The shift comes after 10 years of criticism that Disney prioritized female audiences, often at the expense of male fans, leading to a decline in box office performance for films like Fantastic Four: First Steps and a 7-year hiatus from Star Wars theatrical releases. This strategic pivot is an attempt to recapture a lost audience, but it faces challenges due to damaged brand loyalty and the need for fresh original storytelling rather than recycled IPs. The underlying issue for Disney is not just a loss of audience, but a broader cultural shift where Gen Z men are increasingly turning away from traditional media consumption habits. Disney's focus on diversity and inclusion, while expanding its reach to other demographics, has been perceived by many as neglecting the male-centric narratives that once defined the Marvel and Star Wars IPs. This perception has been exacerbated by the studio's reliance on familiar characters and storylines, which have failed to resonate with younger viewers who are more engaged with digital platforms and alternative forms of entertainment. As Disney scrambles to win back Gen Z men, it must navigate the delicate balance of addressing past mistakes without alienating its current audience, all while competing in a rapidly evolving media landscape where content consumption is fragmented across multiple platforms. Does Disney have a chance to recapture Gen Z men? What could possibly have gone wrong? All right, I'll leave it to you guys.
Male-centric narratives, my arse. By the way, Disney has always been about the princesses. That in itself is not even a recent emergence. Disney built its bread and butter on European folk tales. Snow White is German. Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and Beauty and the Beast are all French, as is Hunchback of Notre Dame, obviously. The Little Mermaid is Danish. Pinocchio is Italian. The Sword in the Stone is English. Aladdin is, well, Arabian, which is peripheral. That was when they started branching out beyond Europe. That's when we had Mulan and Moana and all that jazz. But you'll notice the female lead characters are mostly royalty or the cultural equivalent of royalty. And the male lead characters, as and when they appear, are mostly street rats and squires and even little boys raised by wolves in the Indian jungle or whatever. In fact, Arthur in The Sword in the Stone and Mowgli in the Jungle Book are the exact same character with a palette swap, even down to animated scenes being copied frame for frame. Disney did this for the first pretty much century of their catalogue. They focused on European folktales, and European folktales happened to be mostly about female princesses or male paupers. That's what European culture has made their stories about. Rich girls who encountered hardships and extremely poor dog's body boys who evaded all odds and somehow made it good in the end. So it's not even initially Disney's fault that this weird dynamic has always been ingrained. That's the way European folk tales have ingrained these stories in us for quite a long ass time. And it's because of romantic chivalry, which has been a European tradition for a millennium, like literally a millennium. It was decided some time ago that males should have to work hard to pull themselves out of poverty, whereas females should be rich by default. They should be princesses by default, and they should only have to face challenges that only a princess should ever have to face. Yes, folks, feminism did not invent this idea that all women are queens and that men should aspire to serve those queens. This is a social contagion that has been depth charging its way through our culture like a tapeworm for the last 1,000 years. So it's hardly surprising that Disney doesn't know what the fuck to do other than portray women as royalty and men as peasants. The Grimm brothers had the same problem. Fucking Shakespeare had the same problem. To make female characters interesting to a romantic chivalric audience, they have to be queens and princesses, either in potentia or by divine intervention. Otherwise, women don't give a shit because they see themselves as royalty who should be treated like royalty. Women seem to want aspirational roles, and men want challenging roles. That might sound normal, but it's not necessarily. It seems to be the result of a gynocentric cult mentality that tells women they deserve the world and tells men they should fight the world so that women can have it. This is not, in fact, normal, folks. It's just that we spent the last 1,000 years convincing ourselves that it is normal. That's why Disney is so confused by all this. It's not just because the world has gone incalculably gynocentric in the last 10 years. It's because the world has gone incalculably gynocentric over the last 1,000 years. No wonder they don't know what to do when the only people telling them how deep this misandric problem is terminally online space lepers like us. Traditionalists can't get through to them because traditionalists are under the same spell. They only have one gear, and it's men must give, women must receive. They even think it's evolutionarily normal, but it's not. The reality is that men and women should both give. That way they both receive from each other. That's how you get a mutually beneficial relationship rather than a dysfunctional codependence. I don't expect Disney to understand this anytime soon, because even the majority of males who are complaining about how alienated they feel, even they don't fully understand why and how deep this alienation is ingrained in us. It's like deconverting from a religion, an extremely strict religion, one that's written between the margins of religious texts. Gynocentrism isn't a religion, it's an invasive species of like fungus that grows on the bodies of religions and indeed grows in the absence of religions. We generally lack the vocabulary to describe it because the gynocentric ideology deliberately deprives us of that vocabulary by calling everyone misogynists if they ever venture into that area. I don't know how much damage this is going to do to Disney as they dance around the real problem, hopelessly unable to see the real problem. It's very possible that Disney will die and its fall will be greater and swifter than its rise, just because they can't figure out just how deep this cultural dysfunction is. But I hope they do, because Disney, for all its evils, they are astonishing craftspeople. From their songs to their animation, they are masters when it comes to these aesthetic details. Peerless masters, quite honestly. But when it comes to scripts and plots and character dynamics, they have become lost in the gynocentric dream to which they had almost no choice but to attach themselves. And I look forward to the day they realize that they've been hampered all along by this ancient gynocentric paradigm. Maybe one day they can escape that paradigm and make movies about women who are not necessarily perfect and men who are not necessarily scum. I'm not confident. And frankly, I don't much care if their company crashes and burns. If they can't figure out this obvious truth, they deserve to die. And maybe a phoenix will rise from the flames that truly does treat men and women as equally culpable, equally noble entities. But we'll see. Someone will see. And whoever they are, I hope they live happily ever after. The end.
You know, I don't think Disney actually believes that they are alienating men with this stuff. There have been too many articles from the establishment left-wing media out there where there have been little quotes or other indications that big media corporations, big entertainment media corporations, whether it's making movies or television shows, games, music, books, artwork, anything like that, they all seem to have the consensus that if men don't like what they're doing and they don't like being preached to, if boys don't like stories that don't have the hero's journey that they all crave, if they don't like stories that don't have action and adventure and challenges that they can pretend, they can incorporate into their imagination play, their pretend games and stuff like that, that there's something wrong with the audience and not the creator. And I don't think that this article changes that. I think that what it does is deflect. Because if you noticed in this, they're not so much blaming the fact that they have gynocentric content and that they have male demonizing content and so on, as they are blaming people for not liking diversity and not liking repetition. Oh, it's because we're not creating anything new. If we create new and different ways to demonize men and boys as toxic and useless, and we create new and different ways to portray the girl boss for male audiences, they'll like that, right? And it's not that they don't get it. It's that they want that to work. And it is something that they are using to try to manipulate you so that you will become compliant with other initiatives that try to get you to vote for politicians based on how they serve women, and to step aside in the workplace so that more women can become part of the workplace, so that they can pass more law and policy intended to control men in the workplace on the excuse that they have to do that because men in the workplace are not nice to women in the workplace, right? It's all about power and it's all about control. It has absolutely nothing to do with entertainment, and it has nothing to do with sales. Disney doesn't need the audience. They get BlackRock money, right? They get money from the wealthiest organizations in the world. They get big bank money. They get money from government. The audience money, your money that you spend at the movie theater, And your money that you spend on whatever subscription services are available, that's a drop in the bucket, right? That's nice. That's the icing on the cake for them. But if nobody spends a dime going to see their movies, it'll take a lot for the company to become insolvent, because they are doing what the establishment wants them to do. So the only thing about this article is that it is a precursor. Within the next 6 months or the next year or two, we'll start seeing articles about how hard Disney tried to reach out and extend an olive branch to these evil, toxic male audiences that refuse to patronize the company. And how dare boys and men not appreciate that and reciprocate? We'll see it in some form or another. You just watch this space, because we will be talking about this again. I'm 100% certain of it. I have no doubt. It's exactly the same thing that happened with games industries, from the game creation industry and the game sales industry to reporting on games and game contests and everything. And when the consumer said, "We don't like what you're doing," what did the companies do? What did the media do? Right? They demonized the consumer. They kicked the consumer out. They said the consumer was irrelevant. And then they had a temper tantrum because the consumer said, "Okay, well, fuck you too." So, yeah, just like I said, watch this space. Sometime in the next, like, maybe 6 months to a year, however long it takes them to be able to say, "Look, we've done these new things and it didn't work." We'll start seeing male audiences condemned as toxic and as ism-phobic monsters, and as ungrateful for Disney's not taking Disney's olive branch.
So I think that Disney has been losing money hand over fist for years now, and it's because of these changes they've been making to make brands that were historically male dominated more like their own brands, which are historically female dominated. Mostly Disney is a female brand, although also it was originally a family brand, like in the early days, but more a little bit leaning towards the female. In the 90s with the sort of what they call the Disney Renaissance or the Silver Age, Little Mermaid and all that, it was more feminist. And a lot of people don't want to acknowledge this, but the Disney movies of that time were very feminist and progressive for their time when they came out. When they bought the rights to Star Wars and the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Pixar, which doesn't get mentioned, Pixar suffered a lot as well. These are all brands that were built by men. Star Wars was built by men. It was thought up by men. It was written by men. Marvel Comics was written by men. It was illustrated by men. It was written for men and boys. Very popular with college men, in fact. And the Pixar stuff had a lot of male influence. It wasn't like specifically for men, but a lot of it was when you look at the early Pixar stuff like Toy Story, which was about a boy and his toys, or you look at Cars, or any of the Brad Bird things. Brad Bird was the guy who created Iron Giant, which is definitely a boy-oriented story, as well as The Incredibles, which was so masculine that a lot of, let's say, media literacy experts online call it like a fascist Ayn Rand dream, fever dream of a story, which, there's some truth to, but obviously they didn't like it very much, which is why they killed it in the sequel. But so like they took some brands that were historically for men and they tried to make them for girls, but they weren't really for women or girls either, because they were all queer coded and they had all these activists working there, as well as like what people call Disney adults, so people without kids that go to like the theme parks, and they don't understand families. They don't like families very much. They don't like pairing people who pair up in a normal way and form families. So they tend to make content that's against that in some way. I remember Snoop Dogg got into a little bit of hot water because he was on a podcast with someone, and they were talking about the queering of Disney films, and he was talking about he took like his grandchildren to watch like the Buzz Lightyear movie, the one that no one remembers, that had it was like not related to the Toy Story movies, and I guess it had like some lesbian scene in it, and he was like, I don't want my kids watching that. So that obviously got him in trouble. And it's basically because these people, these writers that work there, they're all putting their activist ideas and their progressive ideas into shit, thinking that it's going to be for the modern audience because their friends like it, which is not really the modern audience, right? It's not the audience. It's a very tiny minority. And now they're scrambling to figure out what the hell went wrong when they're like, I think they're like over $1 billion in the hole for all of their failures between the MCU, the Star Wars stuff, and the Pixar stuff. There was a time, by the way, where Pixar could do no wrong. Like every movie was a smash, every single one of them. And then, when some of the guys that worked there, the old brass, left, and this was right around the time that Disney had bought Star Wars and Marvel, Pixar went right into the tubes, and there was no difference between one of their movies and one of Disney's movies. And what I think is happening now is that they've done the whole shaming thing. They've done that. Like, they've done it with everything they released. They said, oh, the people watch this are chuds, they're misogynists, they hate women, they hate gays, they're racist, whatever. They've done all of that. It doesn't work. Nobody cares. Now they're just like, okay, we have to do something. They're legitimately trying to figure out how to appeal to people they fundamentally don't understand. And it reminds me of the Democrat Party in 2024. When they were trying to appeal to men, and they had like White Dudes for Harris and all of this really cringy, like, I don't know if it's marketing, but I don't know if you would even call it that, but it was like obviously like Hello Fellow Kids for, young guys, and they just have no idea. And so what I would say is that the only way that Disney has a chance of rescuing these IPs is they have to like take the rot out in their own company at the very root. Like, they have to get rid of all of those people who are cancer for the brand and hire new people. And in particular, they need to get men. And I know there's a lot of really talented men out there that have a lot of really good ideas that probably were not given a chance. I can think of a couple of guys I know off the top of my head, like Luke Weber, who is a very talented animator and storyboard artist. And he's a dude, and he's got like dude ideas. He worked on Ben 10, he worked on Ninja Turtles, he knows this stuff. And I know there's a lot of other very talented guys out there. The question is, I don't know if it's really a question, but what the question I would ask is Disney brave enough to actually say, we were wrong, we did we don't appeal to men, we have to figure out how, we're gonna hire whoever we have to hire, we're gonna give them the creative freedom and the space to do something. I think, and I know there's a lot of cynicism in our chat right now, probably, but I think that stories are absolutely crucial, and they could come from anywhere. It doesn't have to be Disney that makes them, but if they want to compete, they're going to have to hire men that know how to tell a story to other men. And that's the only way this is going to work. And I hope they listen, but they probably won't. But that's basically my advice. My advice to Disney is to fire the women, fire the queries, and get the men in there for your Star Wars and your Marvel stuff. Get them in there, and maybe you'll be able to like salvage something. But that's the only way this is going to happen. And I do want that, because I want boys to have stories like I had stories, and like the generations before me had stories. And I think that they're good. Like, stories are how we communicate as humans, is how we share our values and ideas. But they have to be from a place rooted in reality. They have to be downstream from reality. And that means they have to reflect the world that actually exists, not the one that these people want to manufacture. So that's all I wanted to say about that. I guess, let me see if you guys have any comments here. Ben 10's really cool. Yeah. Luke Weber's very cool. He worked on that. So I got a super chat from Albatross, who gives us $5 and says, I really can't see why Disney is so upset. They, well, at least the activists working there, are getting what they fought for a decade and a half. I will say one other thing about that too. I think it's also worth pointing out. One of the reasons why a lot of the people ended up working in these companies that have no talent is because they used the Me Too movement to get a bunch of men fired from their jobs and then took them. So that's another thing too, is that we're still feeling the effects of Me Too when it happened in like 2016, 2017, and it basically resulted in all of our media just going to shit. 2016 on, basically. So remember Ghostbusters? Yeah, that's kind of where it was like where it started. So, but or at least really ramped up, where like male brands were like getting attacked or deconstructed. So anyway, that's basically what I wanted to say about that. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments, and I look forward to seeing your thoughts. Speaking of killing brands, so I didn't know that this was going to be the big deal that it was, but apparently it is. So the popular restaurant chain Cracker Barrel, known for its country hospitality and nostalgic Americana theming, has started a radical brand shift that is rubbing most people the wrong way. Last week, Cracker Barrel unveiled their new logo, which sees the removal of both the old man, the cracker, Uncle Herschel is his name, and the iconic barrel. So the cracker and the barrel are both gone. Despite Cracker Barrel president and CEO Julie Masino making the media rounds and assuring everyone the change is positive and being received well, looking everywhere else spells out the opposite, including the plummeting Cracker Barrel stock price. Social media users have been especially scathing, with many pointing out the sign isn't the only change. Many stores are being refurbished into a more bland and boring corporate aesthetic, mirroring the fates of many modern McDonald's, Taco Bells, and Pizza Huts. Despite the mainstream media's attempts to paint the issue as only one that MAGA or Trumpsters are concerned about, the Democrat Party's official Twitter/X sent out the following message: "We think the Cracker Barrel rebrand sucks too." Facing nearly universal condemnation for the rebrand, Cracker Barrel has finally started to admit fault, stating the following, quote, "If the last few days have shown us anything, it's how deeply people care about Cracker Barrel. We're truly grateful for your heartfelt voices. You've also shown us that we could have done a better job sharing who we are and who we'll always be," end quote. And also, I wanted to add on to that, the CEO of Cracker Barrel, Julie Fels Masino, basically was trying to modernize and refresh the brand while preserving its core identity, making it more relevant to current and future generations. So basically, she was trying to give it the modern audience treatment, which is why it's so goddamn ugly. So anyway, I want to see what you guys think. If you even care? I mean, I kind of do, because it's about aesthetics. But
I'm gonna go off. This is not about aesthetics, okay? This is about men. I don't know if people know this, but that there's a real story behind that original logo. All right. The real life creator of the company, Dan Evans, had a family member, Uncle Herschel, real life relative, who this was based on. He was the goodwill ambassador to the public for the brand. He had this great story. He was, regular guy, flower salesman, worked for, had a whole career, traveled across the South to general stores to make his living, and was involved in the creation of the company. And he brought his long-standing tradition of treat other people the way you want to be treated to the company. I don't know if people are familiar with that concept being associated with a particular religion, but from my experience, that's its most well-known association, even though it may not be its origin. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat others the way that you want to be treated. It is part of the definition of love that is under discussion when you're admonished to love your neighbor. And it is a fundamental principle of how men keep peace in the world. And when it breaks down, there is war. It is the epitome of masculinity. Treat other people the way you want to be treated, because it increases, if nothing else, your chances that they will do the same for you, and you won't have to fight. Right? And to bring that to a company that is trying to sell to people food and products and so on, that is to make a company, its brand, become that of integrity and peacefulness, brotherhood, and love. And it's always been that the restaurants are an incredibly comfortable place because of that attitude. And the removal of that man specifically from that emblem, from that logo, it's not just about updating. It's not just about using less ink or making it look clean cut or anything like that. It's not even just about decountrifying it, which a lot of people have said. It's about removing the masculinity from the company, the fundamental building block, the foundational building block on which that company was built. Because man bad, woman good. And people don't necessarily understand the disgust that the general public has for that. And I don't know that necessarily all of the outrage comes from understanding that. But what that company has done there, like, that's not the erasure of something because people are offended by exploitation of some minority group, or people are offended by mistreatment of some, or some fictional character that's a misrepresentation of, like a stereotype of some minority group. It's a real male human being who had a very great point about how people should treat each other and how customers should be treated by companies that want to sell them things. And that's what they eliminated. That was the thing that they found just intolerable on their logo. It's just like the moment when Google removed "Don't be evil" from the wall in their offices. It's telling you something about the direction that this company intends to go.
Yep. Mike?
Yeah. When I first saw this story doing the rounds on Twitter, I thought to myself, what's the big deal? All they've done is change their logo. How is this a story that everyone's talking about now? It's just a logo. But then it was explained to me that it's not just a logo, it's a complete overhaul of the aesthetic of the restaurant chain. Like, they used to have this sort of rustic, old-fashioned theme, but now they've changed that theme to just this grey, unremarkable slop. They didn't just change their logo, they rehauled the decor of every restaurant across the country. And it cost them like $1 billion, like $700 million or something silly, to do all this redecorating, or rather, undecorating. Like Brian was saying, the same thing happened with McDonald's like 20 years ago. It used to be bright red and yellow because children enjoyed it. They used to have children's play sections within the restaurant with slides and ball pits and whatnot. But then in the mid noughties, across the whole world, they changed it to this dark olive green motif, like this army camouflage shit going on. And at the time, we were all like, what the fuck? How is this an improvement? This is McDonald's. It's supposed to be fun. We were fine with the old thing. Why have you done this? And I think what happened is a bunch of Karens complained. They complained that McDonald's was advertising itself in a child-friendly way. And by doing so, they're making children fat. They alone are making children fat. So these children's mothers went, it's not my fault that I'm choosing to bring my children to McDonald's and feeding them toxic plastic facsimiles of food, and it's making them fat. It's their fault. It's McDonald's fault for having the audacity to be appealing to my children. How am I supposed to say no? We're not going to McDonald's when my children go, but we loved it last time you took us there, mother. Please take us again. And because modern women have this inability to take responsibility and agency, they just went, I don't have to change, you do. Stop putting temptation in the way of me and my kids. We cannot possibly be expected to resist such temptation. And I'm like, maybe a similar thing happened with Cracker Barrel. They do currently have one of those lesbian feminist looking CEOs that keeps fucking everything up. But I don't know. I've never been to Cracker Barrel. You guys have like a million different franchises.
Dude, Cracker Barrel is actually really good. Like I there was not one in Chicago, but when I went to Indianapolis, I used to go to the cons there, like back in the day, and there was a Cracker Barrel in the area. I liked it. It was good. It was really cool, like very like cozy, you know. Anyway, sorry, I just butt in, but Cracker Barrel's don't shit on that place. It's good.
Yeah, the food is amazing, but this action is probably going to kill the business.
I believe you, and I'll believe you when you say all of these other diners are great, but there's so many of them. Like I was saying, you guys have like a million different franchise eateries in America. We don't have those in Britain.
It's America. That's why.
In Britain, we have like Greg's, the bakery / deli, and we have Weatherspoons, which is just a company that bought up.
Well, you guys probably got a lot of like kebab places, though, right?
Yeah, but they're not franchise. They're independent businesses.
It's another aspect of this story that is probably largely ignored. There is an American tradition that fueled the creation and growth of a lot of these mid-range pricing sit-down restaurants. It's not like a super expensive place to eat. It's not priced that high above what it costs to eat fast food.
Yeah, it's like IHOP.
But it's this, yeah, but the food there is definitely loads better than IHOP. I'm not really impressed.
I mean,
with
price-wise,
IHOP.
it's comparable to IHOP.
Yeah, price-wise, it's comparable to IHOP. But it's a sit-down family restaurant that serves entrees that are the kind of thing that you would get with a good home-cooked meal and that kind of thing. And that tradition is people going to Sunday brunch after church. Families going to Sunday brunch after church and socializing at Sunday brunch after church. And I don't know if that's necessarily an early 20th century tradition, but during the mid and latter parts of the 20th century, that was a very strong tradition. Almost everybody that I went to church with and the subsequent churches that I visited, it's the norm in most church cultures that after church, before you go home, while you're still dressed in your Sunday best, as a family, you go someplace nice and go out to eat. And all of these restaurants have capitalized on that, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's nice to create a comfortable, inviting, hospitable, and fun to look at environment for that purpose. And then this is kind of shitting on that too.
And yeah, like I was saying, even in Britain, most of the franchise chain eateries we have in Britain are American ones, like McDonald's and Burger King and KFC. And we have some Pizza Huts and some Domino's. And there's even a Taco Bell in Swindon. I had no idea we had Taco Bell until I saw one in Swindon. American franchise eateries are like the equivalent of unpronounceable British town names or city names or county names. In Britain, we know how they're pronounced, but we only know how they're pronounced because we've lived with them for our whole lives, and eventually we learn where they are and how they're pronounced. In America, you have hundreds of franchise diners like fucking Red Lobster and Olive Garden and Panda Express and Dunkin' Donuts and Krispy Kreme and Chick-fil-A and Popeye and Carl's Jr. and Five Guys and In-N-Out Burger and Wendy's. We used to have that in Britain, but it died in the 80s. And that's the point. I suppose it's because the USA is practically a continent, whereas Britain is just an island in the vicinity of Europe. I'm sure Europe has just as many franchise, but most of them we don't know about because they're in other countries with completely different languages. And I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm mostly waxing lyrical on the difference between European and American culture, but make no mistake, the same thing is happening. The same woke bullshit is working its way through whatever it can work its way through. In the American case, it's burning through your private companies and turning them into grey masses of ashes. In the European case, they're already doing that to our public services. They're doing it to the population itself. What Cracker Barrel is being subjected to is what the European people are being subjected to. We're being turned into a grey brutalist mass of unintelligible architecture. They already killed the possibility of having 100 different choices of where to eat. Now you only have one possibility of who to even be, and it's an undifferentiable beige nothing people. This is your weekly reminder, my American friends. Cracker Barrel is just one of your many canaries in the coal mine. What's happening to your beloved franchises will soon happen to your population. You won't be allowed to show your true colors. You'll be obliged to show whatever colors blend in best to all the other colors. I think you probably get what I'm saying. The apocalyptic phenomenon that calls itself diversity is in fact the opposite of diversity. It's the pursuit of boring, homogeneous homogeneity, where everything is an inoffensive, greyish, beigeish blob that can't possibly rub anyone the wrong way. Don't let it happen. Don't let them turn every franchise into the same interminable greyish brown slop. That way lies the apocalypse. An apocalypse that you won't even notice because it will fuck you from the ass up. You can probably already feel it. You feel that? You probably do. Shit it out, gentlemen. Shit it out as fast as you can.
Breaking news. Well, as of 30 minutes ago, they've reversed course on the Cracker Barrel icon. They're going to go back to the old one. Stocks have already started to rise again.
Is that going to cost them another $1 billion?
I don't know. I don't know if it got like past the stage of like showing it off. You know, like it's not like they're taking the signs down and replacing them. But yeah, word is they've listened to the feedback and they're going back to the old graphic. And I don't know if that. I think that woman, the CEO, she may have to step down. We'll follow up. We'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
definitely they're going to, from what, according to Pirate Nation on X, who is usually like on the bleeding edge of this stuff, they have decided to go back to the old icon. It got memed into oblivion. So I think that's probably why. So yes, beauty wins. We go back to aesthetics. Let's do it.
Good.
So yeah.
I've been told by somebody that that the Cracker Barrel website has added a thing that says that's not Uncle Herschel on our logo. They always said in the past that was Uncle Herschel. So if they're saying now that it's not, that was because of the rebranding. But just so you know, I'm glad that they went back and took a second look at that. Because that's something that a company does if they're actually considering the consumer. So if they're still considering the consumer, that's good.
Yeah, apparently one of the major investors in Cracker Barrel, like one of the big stockholders, who was a man, was like, "This is not going to go well," and they ignored him. So
Of course.
probably
Of
should have
course.
listened to the
They
man
probably
lady.
they probably accused him of mansplaining. Don't mansplain this to
It was
me.
like
People are
it was
gonna
like
love
some
it.
Giga Chad guy with glasses. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
this isn't gonna go over well.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, men are right again.
I
All
like
right.
how people are mentioning Waffle House in the chat too. Yeah, Waffle House is a whole other discussion.
Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, we're going to go into the patron show. This was a longer than normal sausage. So we're going to look at this from an article from The Guardian entitled Middle-Aged Men Are Among Society's Loneliest People. What does that say about patriarchy? By Van Bedham. Because there's nothing that women like this don't like more than when men are suffering so they can blame patriarchy for men suffering. They love it. They love it. But anyway, so if you guys want to join us for this bonus story we're going to be reading through, go to feedthebadger.com/subscribe to join our little cadre, like our little a community in the Discords, and hopefully you'll be able to be there so you can watch all the additional content. If you just want to check out the Discord server, you can also do that by going to badgernation.online for the free version. It basically gives you access to the public square aspects of it, and you can talk to the people there and see if it's, you know, a place you'd like to spend more time in. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you guys there. Remember, we have a meetup coming up September 13th. It is in Calgary, Alberta. So if you're in Canada or can get to Canada, in that part of Canada, please save the date if you want to. We might be doing some streams or something. I don't know. I know we're going to put on some presentations. I'm working on something myself that I think is something needed, something a little fresh for the Badgers over there. So hopefully I'll see you guys at that. And if you are going to be there, let us know in the comments. But with all that said, I want to thank Hannah and Mike for joining me to go through all the stories. I want to thank you guys most of all for watching. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today, and please, please, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Men's right activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.